What is the greatest video game console ever made? Over the more than 50 years that video game consoles have existed, I think there's a ton of names that could warrant this title. The Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Dreamcast, PlayStation 1, Xbox 360, even the Atari 2600, if you're into that. However, I think many people would make a strong argument for the PlayStation 2. The highest selling console of all time, the PlayStation 2 had a cataclysmically powerful catalog, with over 4,000 games released for the thing. Some of the greatest games of all time debuted on this system, as well as some of the absolute worst. With features like a built-in DVD player and online capabilities, the PlayStation 2 was flying off shelves during the 2000s, and even into the 2010s. If there was a console that everyone had, it was the PlayStation 2. I guarantee that you, watching this, if you're over the age of, 15, have very fond memories of your own PlayStation 2 and the games you played on it. It started some of the most iconic series of all time, and left a crater-sized mark on the games industry. I think while looking into how games are made, it's always a good idea to look at some topics that focus on reminding us why we love these games, and the stories behind them. The history of these consoles is just as important as the history of the games on them. So join me as we celebrate the PlayStation 2 by looking back at all the different versions released over its lifespan. Let's find out which was the rarest, and try to do a deep dive into some of their histories. First up, we have the legend itself, the original black PS2. This is as iconic as you can get. If there's any console to remind me of the early 2000s, it's this monolith. It's striking and packed with weird features. They have an expansion bay for hard drive and network adapters, a tray-loading disk drive, and some other features like an IR port. It would be the main PlayStation 2 available on store shelves until its successor, the PlayStation 2 Slim. Now this is the encapsulation of my fondest and most beloved memories, wrapped in a cold, unfeeling plastic and metal box. I absolutely adore this model, and I genuinely think it's one of the best console redesigns of all time. It does lose some of the cool features that the original had, but in exchange, you get one of the smallest and quietest home consoles ever made. It sports a super sleek design and the size of a small book. These two models will continue to get new variations, and that's what we'll be looking towards to find our rarest PlayStation 2. Let's start with the original model, and of course, for this one, our first variation is the satin silver model. This is one of the most common variations of the original PlayStation 2, released pretty much worldwide. It's hard to say this is a collector's item of any sort. It gave this cool, premium feel back in the early 2000s. The biggest drawback that I remember from this console was how easy and noticeable it was to get scratched up. And at that point, it loses a lot of its charm. Still a really cool early 2000s aesthetic model that I remember a ton of people having. Exclusive to Japan, we have the Zen Black PlayStation 2. Nothing in the early 2000s was cooler than electronics with clear plastic. Rocking a clear shell, I can just smell the SpongeBob Season 2 DVD ready to be loaded up. The black coloring on this system is honestly really cool, as it maintains that classic PS2 aesthetic, just with a little extra Y2K flair. All in all, a pretty interesting variation. Next up, Midnight Blue. Another Japan exclusive console, this transparent shell really feels like it came straight out of the PlayStation 2 menu. It really captures the blue and black aesthetic of the PlayStation 2's graphic design. Looking like a dark crystal box, this has to be the coolest variation of the PlayStation 2 we've seen so far, though still not really rare. This wouldn't be the last clear variation of the PS2. The Ocean Blue PlayStation 2 is the rarest see-through console so far, though, again, not all that rare in the grand scheme of things. With some much lighter blue plastic, this console variation lives up to its ocean blue name. Definitely a very interesting looking PS2, but something you can really tell came from the iMac era. It does feel very fitting to the PlayStation 2's blue aesthetic that they were really pushing during the early 2000s. Now here is some of the really good stuff. Unfortunately exclusive to Japan, we have a gold PlayStation 2. This was packaged with a Z Gundam game, and even came with a Z Gundam stand. I don't really know much about Gundam, but it also includes an insignia on the console that I'm assuming is in reference to something in the series. Not only that, but the console also included 2 golden controllers. I think a lot of the time golden consoles and controllers tend to struggle to look great, but the material they used has a somewhat sparkly finish and manages to make itself look like a premium product, not something cheap. Overall, this is 100% my favorite of the console variations that we've seen so far. Strangely enough, considering it's a gold console, this variant isn't even that rare. It's not something you'll casually find browsing your local Goodwill. If you really want to find it quickly though, you'll usually manage to find a variety of different listings for this console online. Still, this is an absolutely fantastic variation. Our next major console variation is a really cool one. Aqua Blue. Released in the EU and Japan, this was a special edition console that, for the Japan release, was made as a celebration of the 50 millionth unit sold. There would be more variations that would release to celebrate this benchmark, and in Japan, the console was actually quite rare. However, the EU release was simply a new variant, and is still rarer than most of the others we've seen so far, but nowhere near the rarity of the Japanese release. The console itself is a really unique shade of lighter blue. I really love the almost metallic feel it gives the console, even without being made of metal. All in all, a great variation that lives up to its name. Another piece of the 50 millionth collection, we have Sakura Pink. It feels like pink console variations used to be a lot more common back in the early to mid 2000s, and they've kinda died out. This model in particular is cool because, like the rest of the 50 millionth special editions, it has a metallic, sparkly look. It's a pretty unique and cool console variation line, and it's fun to have a pink version. The interesting thing about this is that it is technically the least rare version, but since Aqua Blue was released in the EU, it is also technically more rare than that one. Following this, we had the Ceramic White variation. This one came packaged with Gran Turismo 4 Prologue. I've gotta say, out of all the variations that we've seen so far, this one is absolutely my favorite. As I've gotten older, I've really grown to love white console variations, and this is one of the best looking ones I've seen to date. It has a very sleek finish, and honestly, the size of the original PS2 kind of makes it look better, just due to the fact you can see this white monolith chilling in the corner of your room. Unfortunately, we're starting to get into the era of rare PS2s, so this one isn't quite as common, which is a shame because not only does it look great, the included controller looks amazing as well. Funnily enough, following this, we have Pearl White. This was another really special edition PS2, as it was made to commemorate the 20 millionth unit sold. There would be other variations released at the same time, and if you really wanted this variation, you would need to buy all of 5 consoles at the same time in Japan. However, this was given away during a raffle as well. It's obviously pretty similar to Ceramic White, so a lot of my thoughts are the same here. It's a fantastic looking console. It's just a shame it was practically impossible to get without dropping more money than I could put in my will. What were those other consoles that you need to buy at the same time to get Pearl White though? Well, that would be Light Yellow, Super Red, Snow White, Astral Blue, and Metallic Silver. These were all given away in the same celebration as Pearl White, and frankly, they all look pretty good. Although, you can't help but notice that a lot of them look very similar to previous variations that we've already seen. And you can't help but wonder if they just found it as a nice way to reuse a couple shells. The main difference that I can see with these consoles is a really unique glossy finish. A lot of the PS2s on the market, Even the special edition ones had a matte finish, but these ones were unique. However, if there's anything I've learned about these glossy pieces of technology, it's that they get scratched and smudged incredibly easy. So I imagine there's not too many of these out there that aren't in pretty gnarly shape. During this little look through the different console variations, I've mostly been skipping over game bundles. The reason for that being that the consoles are usually just the standard model, bundled with whatever game they're trying to sell with it. However, very rarely, there are console bundles that have unique variations. One being the Ratchet & Clank bundle that was exclusive to Toys R Us. Here we have Toy Blue, not the same as Aqua Blue. You can see it's a lighter variation of that color. I'm guessing they wanted it to be a Toys R Us exclusive color, so they tried to find something that would match with the logo, while still fitting the themes of Ratchet & Clank as well as the PS2. Ultimately, it's a pretty cool color, but not one that I'd be starved to own myself. I bet for Ratchet & Clank fans though, this is probably a really sought after item. It's really unique and features a character that would, inevitably, become one of PlayStation's main mascots. Released exclusively for a now defunct major company. Technically, the Ratchet & Clank bundle is the rarest. However, if we're looking at a color variation that was already released, the rarest officially released consoles are the White Feel-A-Heart console bundle and the standard ceramic white console bundle, both released in Japan with extremely low quantities. The Feel-A-Heart bundle was made to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Yamada Denki, a huge electronic distributor, and only had between 1 to 5K made. The standard ceramic white model had around the same amount of units produced. It was just not very widely released. I think this might have had to do with the fact that it released not too soon before the slim model would be introduced. However, this is only covering the original PlayStation 2 models. The slim models could potentially be more interesting considering that they were the de facto PlayStation 2 model up until the console's end. So, are we gonna wind up finding a rarer console with the PlayStation 2 Slim? Well, before we get there, there are actually technically even rarer PlayStation 2 models than the ones officially released. The PlayStation 2 was a hot commodity, and as such, it was the grand prize of a ton of different giveaways. What were the special PlayStation 2s that you could get through various promotions? We had the Coca-Cola PlayStation 2, given away during some sweepstakes. It's likely that only about 100 of these exist. There's not a ton of info on where exactly they came from, other than the fact that they were given away and there was around 100 made. Very interesting design that I'm assuming makes sense somewhere in the world around this time for Coca-Cola. There's the Build Shop newspaper magazine Sims console, given away during a postcard lottery in Germany. Only 15 were produced, and the contest ended April 7th, 2003. There's the VGX Final Fantasy X console, given away in the VGX magazine. There were 2 different Time Splitters 2 consoles, one winnable by a questionnaire lottery from Eidos Interactive, and another given away on GamesWeb.com. We have the Nickelodeon PlayStation 2, given away at the Kids' Choice Awards back in 2001. It came with 3 Nickelodeon games, and had the iconic Nickelodeon Splat logo on the front of the console. From Acclaim, we have the Alias PS2 console, given away during a promotion to advertise the upcoming game. We also have an exclusive Donald Duck PlayStation 2, given away in the German Mickey Mouse magazine, where you had to answer what the PS in PS2 stood for to enter. Socom Navy Seals was a huge franchise for Sony on the PlayStation 2. And there's actually an exclusive giveaway console created for the game. 4 of these were made and given away on the PlayStation.de website, and the Play the PlayStation magazine through 2003. Here's a cool Transformers PS2 won through a German lottery. Only 4 were ever made of this one. Look at this lime green monster. This is the Axe Deodorant PS2. This was won through a contest held by Axe, where, yet again, they gave away a bunch of PS2s in a lottery. And by a bunch, I mean, at most, probably 50, and even that might be generous. Here's the Driver 3 PS2, created as promotion for the upcoming game that was, yet again, given away in a contest. Eidos gave away yet another PS2, this time for the game Commandos 2. To win this, you had to correctly answer what the name of the Spanish company behind Commandos 2 was. There was also a Xbox variant that they created as well to give away. Now we have the Project Zero PlayStation 2, also given away by lottery. Even a gambling company made their own custom PS2. This is the Winomat exclusive PlayStation 2. The slot machine company gave this away as part of their Christmas raffle. You could also win standard PS2s as well, but this was the grand prize. Honestly, it's kinda ugly. Here we have the Freedom Fighters PlayStation 2. You could win this by dropping off a postcard at the EA booth of a, well, now unknown event. There was only one of these ever made. Magazines seem to have a lot of these promotional consoles that they'd give away, because here's yet another with the World Racing Red PS2. This was given away in a Dutch Play Games magazine. We have the Decepticon and Autobot PS2s, winnable in the Play the PlayStation June 2004 issue. Play the PlayStation has one last special PlayStation 2 that they gave away, the Ghost Recon variant. There was a bunch of other stuff you could win as well, but this was very clearly the grand prize. Now this, to date, is known as the Rarest original PlayStation 2 variant. Of course, this is yet another airbrushed special edition giveaway console. But the way you would win this is so obscure and so practically impossible that you could understand why it's the rarest original PlayStation 2. And right here, this is the rarest original PlayStation 2 ever made. Haribo Gummy Bears. So how would you have possibly won this? Well, you had to be in Hessen, Germany in 2002 to start with. There was a youth event called You that held a singing contest. The only way to win this Haribo PlayStation 2 was to come in first place in the singing contest. This is the only variant of this console, and this was the only way to ever win it. A very weird finale for the original PlayStation 2. However, if you want to talk about PlayStation 2 variants, we're nowhere near done. Maybe about halfway? Because in 2004, Sony would wind up releasing what is, to date, probably one of the best console revisions ever released. Take a look at the slim PlayStation 2. I absolutely love this design. It's probably a little bit of nostalgia, because honestly, it was my first video game console I ever owned. I remember getting it back in Christmas 2004 from my parents, which was pretty beneficial because this thing was also cheap. And of course, by 2004, there were already tons of fantastic games released for the system. This thing was quiet, it worked incredibly well, it was an absolute warhorse, and it played all of your PS2 and PS1 games. I loved it. And honestly, I still love it. It did lose a lot of features that the original PlayStation 2 had. But truthfully, as a 4-year-old, not having a hard drive slot meant nothing to me. Still a great console redesign, but if you really want to get a PlayStation 2 nowadays, there's probably better options if you really want to take advantage of just what the PlayStation 2 was capable of. However, after 2004, this would be the de facto PlayStation 2 in stores. So of course there are going to be a ton of different variants of this console as well. You gotta remember, the PlayStation 2 lasted an insanely long time. It's still, to this day, the highest selling video game console ever made. Although, that might be beaten by the Switch here soon. So let's take a look at just what variants the PlayStation 2 Slim provided. First off, we have the standard matte black. it's pretty much the same as the original, now fitting the PlayStation 2 Slim. This is the one that I had as a kid, and more than likely, a lot of people had. Our first true variation is the Satin Silver console. This has the same finish as the original PlayStation 2, as well as the same color. However, I feel like it works a little bit better than the original model. I can't really put my finger on why, but it just feels sleeker and more advanced. These were super common as well, and still had the same scratches issue, although I don't remember seeing them quite as often as on that original model. Still a great little variation. Next up, we have the white PlayStation 2 Slim. Very similar once again to the standard white PlayStation 2. Funny thing about this one is these are actually a lot more common, which is weird when thinking about it, because I don't remember ever seeing anyone own a white variant. Once again, another sign of the early 2000s that's, for some reason, kind of fallen off in recent years, is the pink PlayStation 2 Slim. I mean, pink consoles and pink technology used to be everywhere, but I really can't remember the last time I saw a piece of pink tech. Pretty great variation if you really like the color pink. Cinnabar Red. I think I'm realizing more and more that these striking consoles just seem a lot more rare in the modern day. Although, I have seen red variants of the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, I think. I really like this console. It reminds me of the greatest hits disc variations that we saw a lot of during this generation. That striking red always stuck out really heavily to me, and was always really cool to see in stores. Of course, nowadays, for collections, it's a little painful. But the PlayStation 2 Slim variant feels like it'd be a great console to have if you really like collecting those greatest hits games. All in all, I really like this variant. It's clean, and it just feels a lot more fitting for the PlayStation 2 Slim. Final Fantasy is a series that I haven't really managed to sit down and play through much of. On the PlayStation though, it feels like Final Fantasy is an essential series. As such, it makes a lot of sense that Final Fantasy XII would get its own PlayStation 2 Slim variant. It's pretty much the same as the black console, but with the Final Fantasy XII insignia right on the top. Pretty cool if you're a fan of the game, or you were just looking to get a PlayStation 2 specifically to play it, considering it came with the game. And we're already at our last official PlayStation 2 Slim variant. Now there's more contest and giveaway consoles after this, and frankly, I mean, this one wasn't meant to be obtained by average consumers. But out of the ones officially made by Sony, this is it. This is the Gran Turismo 4 PlayStation 2 Slim, given away specifically to retailers and different outlets who sold a really high amount of copies of the game. It's a unique variant that ultimately is pretty rare, but still not rarer than some of the rarest original PlayStation 2s. It's pretty cool, but it's really just a Gran Turismo logo put on a PlayStation 2 Slim. And not even one of the cool variant colors. It's just the black PlayStation 2 Slim. I guess it's more of a trophy piece than something you were ever actually meant to play, but kind of an underwhelming rarest official PlayStation 2 Slim. Well, maybe it's not the rarest official PlayStation 2 Slim. Maybe it wasn't manufactured the same way as a lot of the other PlayStation 2 variants, but I have a hard time believing that our absolute rarest PlayStation 2 was not made with Sony's knowledge. And that one, that is truly special. But before we get to that, let's take a quick look at the giveaway consoles that were made for the PlayStation 2 Slim. There's the NBA Live 07 PlayStation 2 Slim console, which is just the game's box art airbrushed onto the top of a PlayStation 2 Slim. The only known photo of the console has a picture of it signed, and the funny thing about that is, well, nobody knows whose signature this is. I guess if you're a fan of the game, it's a pretty cool variant to have, but a little boring. NASCAR 06 Total Team Control had its own giveaway console produced by EA, and the website Speed Maniacs. It falls in the same trap as the previous one, where it's just an airbrushed version of the box art. 4players.de gave away their own Kim Possible airbrushed PlayStation 2 during their Christmas advent calendar. I know there are tons of fans of the show, so I'm sure for them, this is pretty neat to see. Kind of a weird choice for a giveaway console though. The most mysterious PlayStation 2 variant, the Heineken PlayStation 2. Nobody really knows where this actually came from. It was discovered in a yard sale in Romania. I am dead fucking serious about that one. It could have been from something called the Heineken Jammin' Festival. It's theorized that Sony might have sponsored the event, but nobody knows for sure where this thing came from. A pretty funny story for a variant that's ultimately pretty boring. We have a Chronicles of Narnia themed PlayStation 2, given away during some Narnia contests, but nobody knows for sure. Here's the Buckler PlayStation 2, given away by the Buckler Beer Company during the contest. Check out this Tekken 5 themed PlayStation 2, given away by GamePro Germany during one of their 2005 issues. The German Mickey Mouse magazine celebrated its 55th anniversary during 2006, and during this point, you could mail in to enter a contest to win an exclusive PlayStation 2 variant. They also had an Xbox 360 variant on raffle at the same time, and I think that's just kind of funny. We have the Cartoon Network PlayStation 2 Slim console, given away by Cartoon Network Scandinavia in the middle of their advent calendar. Always pretty cool to see classic Cartoon Network stuff from this area. There's also the Tomb Raider Legend PlayStation 2 Slim. This crusty, grainy picture is the only known photo of it, and nobody knows where it came from or why it was made. So definitely the PS2 with the least amount of info on it. And now, we have our final PlayStation 2 variant. This could be argued as being the rarest PlayStation 2 in existence. Now the same could also be said about the Haribo and Heineken consoles, because they only had one made. This one, however, I feel like deserves the title just because it is easily the coolest PlayStation 2 variant ever made. And also, probably the coolest console variant in existence. The most amazing console variant I have ever seen is the Need for Speed actual car PlayStation 2. Okay, now to clarify, you can't drive this thing. It's not even the size of a drivable car. But it is an actual car design made into a PlayStation 2. This thing is incredible. It has its own themed controllers. You need to open up the hood to put the games in the disc reader, which, by the way, the hood is the disc reader. The thing lights up when you use it. I mean, that's how you know it's on. The headlights and rear lights light up when you turn it on. And how do you turn on the console, you ask? Well, you put a key in the car and turn the ignition, of course. I mean, what the hell? This is insane. And the amount of production effort that had to have gone into this one console that was given away is nuts. This has got to be the most incredible variant I've ever seen for just about any piece of technology. This console was given away by EA and Spirit players as promotion for Need for Speed Most Wanted during a game convention in Leipzig during 2006. Truly the most incredible PlayStation 2, and one of the rarest as well. This console really encapsulates that 2000s era. Nothing can really compare to this. Even if things like the Haribo console might technically be rarer, this is, in my opinion, more rare just due to the fact that I can guarantee there are way more people who want this over the basic Haribo PlayStation 2. Still, if we're looking at the rarest PlayStation 2, I think we have our answers. For the original PlayStation 2 model, without a doubt, the rarest PlayStation 2 is the Haribo console. For the PlayStation 2 Slim, I would say it's the Need for Speed Most Wanted actual car console. However, you could also make a case for the Heineken console being the rarest, just due to the mysterious history surrounding it. All in all, the PlayStation 2 had tons of great variants, which is fitting considering the absolute slew of fantastic games for the console. I'd argue it's one of the most influential consoles ever made, and definitely one of the best. I think looking at console variations is almost an important time capsule of the era these consoles were released in. And there's history behind these as well. My thing with game history is that I feel like it's not preserved well enough. I mean, sure, you're just watching a goofy retrospective on PlayStation 2 console variants, but I think it's really important that we acknowledge and spread this history. Games as a medium don't have the historical preservation that things like movies and music do. However, I believe that games are just as important cultural touchstones, especially within the modern day, and looking at these console variants helps remind us of what our culture looked like during that time. And the PlayStation 2, being one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and one of the most fondly remembered, I can't think of a better console to remind us just what video games can do for our culture.